broadcasting live out of a basement in Appleton, Wisconsin. You're tuned into Fox Cities Core on WCZR Code Zero Radio. We're the show that gives you an opportunity to call in and be a part of the show. Our call-in line is 920-358-0795. Core. My next guest has been involved in the music scene since the 90s. He's a multi-instrumentalist currently based out of Madison, Wisconsin. He recently released an EP called All Joy. I'd like to welcome Steev Baker.
I'm gonna hold that up. Here's the album right here. Hey, Andy.
How's it going?
Excellent. I'm wide awake now. I've had all this coffee and a long drive. So
you're based out of Madison. How long have you been in the Madison area?
Moved out there almost 9 years ago now. So yeah, before that I was in, I started in Oshkosh and then Fond du Lac and then Kewaskum. I kept moving further south and then ended up moving over to Madison. So 9
years. I'd consider you a Madisonian at this point.
It doesn't feel like it. It's really weird because there's 2 years in there that don't count. Because everyone was just stuck at home. That was when we had a global pandemic. Everybody.
So we're going to talk a lot about the new EP, which is fantastic.
Thank you.
But let's kind of talk about 3 decades almost, like 2.5. If you want to get
2.5.
That's a long time to be in music. So let's kind of go back to like when you got interested in music and when you picked up an instrument. What kind of instrument you learned?
So I think I don't know if this is like most people. I mean, I learned on guitar, and I started playing music because I wanted to write music. I kind of considered myself a writer first. Like when I was a kid, I was like, I knew from a pretty young age. Well, knew because I'm not doing it now as like for a living. I'm a librarian, which is close to being a writer, but not quite. But anyway, when I was a kid, I was like, I want to be a writer. I'm going to write anything, all kinds of stuff. And I really liked music. I grew up in a pretty musical family, mostly surrounded with like church music. And like my mom played piano every week in church. And I learned how to sing by sitting next to my aunt, who had a real like loud harmony vocals in all the hymns. And she would just like, bust out these harmonies. And so I kind of learned just by listening to that. And so I just, at some point, you get to be a teenager and you get all these surly ideas about, how terrible life is. So you want to write them down. And so then I picked up a guitar somewhere in there. I was probably like 15 or 16. And my dad had an old 12-string guitar that was his when he was a teenager. And it probably only had like 10 strings, and they probably hadn't been changed since the 70s. But I kind of taught myself on that, playing mostly like folk hymns, like from this summer camp I used to go to when I was a kid. It was a church camp, and it always had like guitar accompaniment. This guy up there with an acoustic guitar, everyone singing along, and I was like, I'm like, I want to be that guy someday. Actually, I have this pile of things here. I'm just going to show. This is the songbook from Northern Grace Youth Camp when I was a kid growing up, and it was like I said, it's like a bunch of like folk hymns. I mean, this thing is like essentially it's like a zine. It's pretty cool. It's like rusty staples and stuff, but anyway, that's kind of, so I taught myself how to play using those songs, just, like basic folk chords, and then just started writing songs pretty much like when I was 16 and haven't really stopped since then.
And when was the first time you played out? At some point, I'm imagining you decided to get in front of people.
I did. So I have a twin brother, and our grandpa was a pastor in Madison. So whenever we would go to visit him at his church, he would have us come up to the front and sing songs together, which looking back now, I feel like maybe not the best thing to do to like a little kid, but I don't know. I mean, I don't remember it being terrible. They'd be just sing Amazing Grace or whatever. And so we'd have to just like stand up there in front of the church and like sort of harmonize with each other. And so that was kind of like the first time that I ever like sang in front of people. and then people being like, "Oh, you've got such a nice voice," and then thinking, "Well, okay, well, that's cool. I can do that." So that was kind of like my main experience, like growing up, was like singing in church, and then probably I'm trying to remember the first time I ever played in front of just like normal people. It was probably, it was like somewhere in the like mid 90s or whatever, when everyone in my world was like trying to play, acoustic rock, like Nirvana Unplugged or whatever. And so, yeah, I never really picked up an electric guitar much. It was usually all acoustic guitar, just because I would always sing along. So, it was just the easiest for me. But yeah, it was probably somewhere in the mid 90s, playing in front of people.
So your twin brother didn't take the same musical kind of journey that you took.
He did not. Yeah, unfortunately. I don't know. He's a graphic designer, so it's a little different kind of art headspace there. And then I have a couple other siblings, and they have all done music, things like that. But yeah, I'm the only one that really stuck with it, I guess, like through like being this old to the point where I have like a white beard. And, yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Did you ever have a family band put together with
we didn't,
siblings?
we always talked about it.
And you had the in-house, like people, the whole
yeah,
crew.
no, totally. Yeah. And like my middle brother, he's a multi-instrumentalist, and he plays, like hard rock metal type stuff, but he plays everything. He started out on drums, and so he did the first Inkwell Collective album we recorded in his basement studio, and he did like the mixing and the production on that. He's always been a real big help with like coming out to shows and stuff, like when he was like a young guy in his 20s and I was a little bit older guy in my older 20s, and he would come out and like help me run sound, because I'm like, oh my gosh, we've got an electric guitar and a viola and a cello and a piano and a bass. I don't and then I would ask him to come up and like help mix it on the fly, like as we were playing. So that was always cool.
So you mentioned the Inkwell Collective. When did you start that band?
I'm trying to remember now. It was like, so the progression was when I first moved to Oshkosh in like, I think it was like 1996 or 7. I was kind of in between things. I'd gone to Bible college in Grand Rapids, Michigan for 2 years, and decided I didn't want to do that. And I just really wanted to like come and like learn literature, and I wanted to be a writer. So I moved up here because my girlfriend at the time lived here, and so I moved up here. I took a year off and just worked for a building company in the Fox Cities, which was actually really awesome. I lived in Oshkosh, and I would sometimes take my bike down to what's it called? Javasphere? Was that one of the coffee shops? There was a coffee shop, and it was the first time I ever saw Aaron Bear. He was walking to this open mic with what I thought was like a violin case, and I'm like, oh, this guy looks really cool. He's gonna bust out this violin, and he opened it up, and there was like a ukulele inside, and I was really taken aback. But yeah, so I mean, that was kind of the first time that I realized there was like, oh, there's like music going on here in Oshkosh. So I had that year where I was mainly working the whole time. And then when I started as a student at UW Oshkosh, I met my friend Emily Selk Loper, who plays cello with me, and she's played cello with me for almost 25 years now. We were students in the English department at UW Oshkosh. So was Stephen McCabe. That's where I first met him. And so I started to kind of like put people together. My friend Kara Westmus, who was like a childhood friend, I saw her just by chance on campus one day. She was walking by with, again, what I thought was a violin case. Turns out to be a viola case. And I was like, hey, do you want to be in a band? And she was like, I don't know. I've never done that before. So
you never even heard her play before. You just,
yeah, no, I just knew like, well, she's on campus. She's on the university campus with a viola. She must be good. Right. So, So she and I started playing together, and then I met a drummer through another friend of mine. And so that was kind of the first time I put together, I wanted to do like an all acoustic, like rock band. And actually, I'm going to show another thing here.
I love the show and tell.
Yeah. So this album right here, Strip Cycle by Mike Knott, was probably like my most influential, one of my most influential albums growing up. So Mike Knott was well, he's still alive, but he doesn't do music anymore. He was a singer-songwriter from California, and he was like in like this underground Christian music scene, in the 90s, and he put out a ton of music. But he also struggled with alcohol and had all kinds of problems later in that decade. Kind of led to the falling apart of his music career. But this album he put out, and it's all acoustic and it heavily features cello. And I loved it so much, and I was like, oh, I gotta like figure out how to do something like that. So as I was putting together people who played different instruments, I'm gonna do another thing here. So this album, Jeremy Enoch's Return of the Frog Queen, was, he was the lead singer of Sunny Day Real Estate. Look at him. He's like so young. He's got so much hair in this picture. If you've seen him play lately. But this album was like blew my mind when I heard it. It came out, I think, in 96. And it's completely orchestral. It's a short album, but it's just so beautiful. And his vocals are like, he does a lot of like yelling and screaming, I guess you could say, but just like real intense emotional vocals, and then accompanied with like these like swelling strings and piano parts and stuff like that. And so again, like as I'm like building in my mind this like music style that I want to someday write in, these albums were like huge in that, and then trying to figure out, okay, who do I know that can play things? And then, I had Emily that I met, and Kara, my ex-wife. Jessica played piano, so she was in the band as well. And so like right there's like 3 classically trained people in the band. And then Jesse Gildenvand, who I still play with, I don't even remember how we met, but it was probably like, it was on campus in Oshkosh.
Steve said on your Bandcamp page that Jesse said that Steve is one of the hottest folk music hipsters he knows.
Okay, yeah, well, he says a lot of funny things like that. Yeah, gosh, that guy, like, and he and I had like similar childhoods, kind of growing up in like very church-centric families, and listened to a lot of the same bands. So he played electric guitar in this style that was just like amazing, and that I love so much. It's like very ambient and strange. And so when I found out that he had some of the same like musical background as I did, I was like, hey, do you want to join this band? We're like, there's a ton of people in it already, but I'm sure we could make it work. So yeah, and then at one point we even had a violin player on top of all that. So I think we had like 8 people at one point at maybe one of our last shows that we did that. And it was always a mess because I didn't have any money. I mean, I was in my early mid 20s at the time, but I was already graduated. I already had 1 kid, maybe 2, while we were playing. And just trying to make ends meet, so we didn't have a lot of money for gear and stuff. And how it's really hard to control live sound when you've got all these acoustic instruments, plus electric guitar, plus a drum kit, electric bass. So that was the Inkwell Collective, and we played around in the area for maybe close to a decade. So that was like the early 2000s, and actually brought. I was gonna try to dig through and find a bunch of posters and stuff, but I could only find one. It's not necessarily related to the Inkwell Collective, but this is like around that same time. This is a poster from 2006 for a bunch of a bunch of people playing music together in 2006 at the New Moon. So it was Andrew Johnson is Holly and Plastic, Stephanie Ott is the Daffodil Mafia, Chris Kruger is Southerly, and Steve Baker is Inkstained. That was like my solo acoustic music name. So, you know, it was like a lot of like really interesting, cool people doing interesting, cool things at the time, which was really great. You know, for some reason we all kind of had similar ideas of like acoustic music, singer-songwriter style music, but like different enough that it all worked pretty well.
So the Oshkosh music scene in the early 2000s, was it a pretty bustling scene at that point?
It felt like it to me. It felt like there was a lot of, there was a lot going on, you know, and even though this is a general complaint that I'm going to throw out there for the entire state of Wisconsin. There's just not enough good venues. And Oshkosh certainly, like, you know, there were places to play, but like there was really nowhere that had like a dedicated stage and, you know, like a sound person or, you know, anything like that. So yeah, I mean, we would cobble things together and like we'd go to coffee shops and try to fit, you know, 5 to 7 people on a stage and stuff like that. And
you probably had the New Moon back in that
time.
time.
Yeah, we played at the New Moon quite a bit.
There's like a 513, it's called 513. I think it was like a dance club or something. It's on Main Street.
I don't remember that one.
It's definitely not there anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and we did a show at the Reptile Palace. I think we only played there one time, which is really interesting. And this guy came to one of my shows in Madison like a month ago, and he's like, "Oh, I saw you guys play there. I saw the Inkwell Collective play at the Reptile Palace, and I thought you guys were awesome, and I wanted to come and see what you were doing 20 years later." And it was interesting because it was still me and Emily playing, and you know, we still have. There's maybe only one Inkwell Collective song still in the set list, but yeah, it was cool. I mean, it was mainly like meeting all the different musicians and stuff, and like playing with people and talking with people. But I mean, unfortunately, by that time, like at one point, I remember like when I first met Jeff Mitchell, we were living in an apartment on Jefferson Street, and he lived in an apartment across the street from us. And a friend of mine and I were like out on our porch playing, you know, I was playing banjo and he was playing mandolin or something like that. And, you know, Jeff Mitchell's like a multi-instrumentalist, and he's like, "Hey, you guys play folk music too? Let me go get something and come right back and jam with you guys." So that was really cool. But I mean, those kind of opportunities kind of got few and far between when I like moved to Fond du Lac and started having a lot of children and like, you know, just kind of getting on with like adult life. But I still kept doing music. So, I mean, I've been fortunate in my life that I've been able to pretty much do that nonstop, you know, and like moved quite a few times since then, and taken breaks.
Since
but
you just mentioned Fond du Lac,
yeah.
You were part of the Fondy Acoustic Music Alliance.
Yeah,
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like what did the Fondy Music Alliance entail?
Okay, so I don't have any visual aids for that one, but that was really interesting. It was like, so again, I was in my like early to mid 20s, and you know, I had all these ideas in my head about like what is music going to be like, how what are the possibilities for music, for singer-songwriters, what is folk music? I had all these very specific, maybe not specific, but I had some ideas that were different than what a lot of the older generation had. You know, when I grew up in like the 80s and 90s, but I didn't really listen to any popular music until like probably my senior year in high school, because we weren't allowed to listen to secular music in our house. So I just never had anything like that. So I didn't grow up with like a vocabulary of popular music that most people do. So like I didn't listen to Bob Dylan. I didn't listen to the Beatles until I was in my 20s. I didn't even really know, you know, any of that stuff. So the Fondy Acoustic Music Alliance was some older guys who were like folk music people, you know, and they were like really into the folk scene and like traveling, like the regional singer-songwriters traveling around. So there's a space in Fond du Lac. It's called the Thelma now. It's like their art center. And it used to be just like a Masonic temple that was just like available for rental. And it had like a really beautiful stage area on the second floor.
Is that right by the library?
Yeah, it's across the street from the library down there. So FAMA, as they were called, they would do like fundraising throughout the year, and then they would put out a series of like singer-songwriter events. That was actually really cool. I mean, I can't remember all the different artists that they had, but it was the first time that I had been involved in like the adult music scene, where it wasn't like a bunch of people like playing in bars and like, you know, standing outside smoking cigarettes and, you know, talking about guitar pedals and stuff. It was like, no, like they're singer-songwriters, and you know, they were all folk musicians, so it was, for them it was a lot like, okay, we're gonna rip out this mandolin solo, now it's your turn to do a solo. And I would just be like, I'm more of a singer, I don't really do solos. So unfortunately I never really learned how to like master that aspect of it. But so that was a group that was already established, and I kind of like came in their later years as like the token young guy who was like trying to throw out some new ideas and like, hey, you know, how about we get these people in? And they're just like, no one's ever heard of that. And when I talked them into having Dr. Kickbutt in the Orchestra of Death come and play, one of the guys resigned from the board. He's like, I'm not going to have my name associated with a band called the Orchestra of Death. So he just left. That was it. And then I felt a little bad about that, but I also felt like, no, like folk music is more than just, you know, you playing the standards all the time and everybody taking a solo. It's like, you know, it's like people, it's like lived and breathed experience that has, you know, turned into song, you know. And I, when I was at UW Oshkosh, I worked at the radio station there, and I had a radio show called, this has a name that I can't remember now because there's all these cameras on me and all these lights. But anyway, that's not important. The important thing is that it was a radio show that I put on from...
It was an acoustic radio show.
It was an all acoustic. That was, in theory, it was an all acoustic radio show. And it was from like midnight. It was midnight to 2 a.m. on a Saturday, which is like the absolute worst time for a student acoustic radio show. Maybe. I don't know.
Well, if you're at a party and you're like, let's get this party rocking.
Right.
Well, the acoustic radio show's on. Let's turn it on.
Yeah. I hear they play Leadbelly every week. Turn it up. That was kind of like my, the first time that I had experienced like actual authentic folk music. And, like I would, you know, go through all their CDs and stuff back in the studio and just try to find stuff. And I was introduced to all kinds of artists. I think Gillian Welch was, I heard her on a compilation at the time, her song, My Morphine, which like, when I heard that song, I was just like, I was blown away. You know, it was just kind of like on the same level as like listening to Return of the Frog Queen. You know, I was just like, wow, somebody can write a song like this and play it like this. And it's just so beautiful and sparse and like painful, but it's like, you know, but it's also real. You know, it's not like a cover of someone else's song, which covers are fine. I'm just not good at them. But it was pretty incredible experience learning about folk music that way. But it was a little different than some of the other people there.
I want to get back to that, your experience at the radio. But first, you mentioned covers. Greg Schiller's always on you about Not Your Stepping Stone. So what's up with that? I know you said in response that you've only covered like 6 songs your whole life.
Yeah. When we were doing the Inkwell Collective, this young guy came to play violin with us, and he was like a violin prodigy. And he was like, he wanted to play covers, and he wanted to be in like a jam band, you know, which is cool. But I was like, we have 2 rules here. We don't ever play covers, and nobody gets a solo, which is horrible. Those are terrible rules, everybody, for like building musical camaraderie with people. But I was kind of like a singer-songwriter tyrant at the time, and I was like, no, this is here. I'll whistle you. I would like whistle all of Emily's parts for her to play on the cello because I don't know how to write music, so I would just like whistle them for her and be like, okay, this is your part, and then you got to play it there and play it there. Anyway, it works okay if you're kind, but if you're a jerk, which I'm not saying I'm a jerk, but I could definitely be a jerk. But yeah, so like I was saying, the reason I started playing guitar was because I wanted to write my own songs. And so I just never bothered to learn anyone else's songs. When I was at Grace Bible College, which is where I met Greg Schiller, which is funny because I've like not talked to him in like 20 years. And it's just like, he's this Facebook friend that pops up every once in a while. Hi, Greg, if you're watching or listening. But yeah, I used to play, I had that in my set. And I think I would go into About a Girl by Nirvana because they had like similar chord progressions. But yeah, that was just one of the songs that I did. I don't know, because I think when I was, when my brother and I were young people, in my house, we would wake up early, like 6 a.m. And the Monkees TV show was on at like 6 a.m. on like channel 18 or something like that, one of these UHF stations. And we turned the TV on real low because we didn't want our parents to know we were watching a show about rock music. And so the Monkees were actually like an early influence of mine, like for, whatever that means. But that song, I was just like, yeah, this is an easy song to play and it kind of rocks and I can yell at the end. But I had like, there was like a Johnny Cash song that I did, and there was nobody like real popular. And that's the problem, is that because I didn't listen to a lot of like real familiar music, that like me saying, I'm going to do a Damien Jurado cover, like some people might know that it's a Damien Jurado cover. Most people will have never heard the song before, so that's why I just never put any covers in my repertoire.
Greg won't let you forget, though, that you once did.
I guess not. I forgot completely. So that's nice that somebody remembers that, hopefully fondly.
So when you were doing the radio show at UW Oshkosh, you would go up to was it the 4th floor or the 5th floor?
It was somewhere up there, yeah.
Were you normally by yourself up there, or did you have somebody that worked with you?
I did, yeah. I had a co-host. Her name was Natalie. I don't remember her last name. She was the radio, TV, film major, so I was an English major, and she was like, I'm supposed to do a radio show. I don't know anything about music. I don't know anything about radio. I don't know. I don't remember why she was a radio, TV, film major, but I worked with her at the university bookstore. So I was like, hey, I'll do it. I'll help you out. And she's like, okay, well, what kind of show do you want to do? And I'm like, well, I don't know. Like, I just like acoustic music or whatever. And so I was Acoustic Steev. She was called Pick, like after a guitar pick. The show was called No Electricity, and I spent a lot of time making posters and putting them up all around campus that I thought were really clever. I was like, people are they're not even going to be able to resist listening to this show because these posters are so great. It was like a picture of people playing badminton with just the words "no electricity" on it. Because that's not, badminton is a non-electric sport, unlike most sports. So she was there most of the time. Sometimes she wouldn't show up, but I was always there. I'm like, I got to hit my midnight to 2 a.m. And it was a call. People could call in too. One time somebody called in and asked us to play Desolation Row by Bob Dylan. And I was like, okay, well, we have like 30 minutes left in the, in the show. So here's the last song. That was easy. And later on, I've got another picture of this. This is after I graduated, maybe a year or two. We actually got to go up and play live on WRST. So here's a shot of Emily and Kara playing. And so this is like a time, the Inkwell Collective was constantly struggling with drummers. Because what drummer wants to play with, a bunch of string players? Maybe a drummer, but my friend John Olshevy, who was like kind of part of the Fond du Lac music scene at the time, he played drums with us for a while, and then he was like, "No, I really want to be in a prog rock band." So then he left. Nemaya Tribolini played drums with us. He's on our EP here, which is called National Bellwether. It's the Inkwell Collective EP that we recorded with Jeremiah Nelson in probably an illegal basement studio somewhere in Oshkosh. And so, yeah, it was like a constant revolving door of different drummers. So at the time we didn't have a drummer. So a bunch of us just crammed into the studio at WRST. I think there were 6 of us in there sitting all around the room with, just like whatever mics they could scrounge up, and played a bunch of songs. So that was pretty fun.
You obviously still have a copy of that somewhere.
I do. I've got it probably on like an old MacBook that barely runs. So I would love to get that up on the internet at some point, because I know it's got some really cool songs. And Jesse played with us that time. He was another one that was like always very supportive of us, and he like, in fact, I'm going to go over and hang out with him later today, but and he still plays with me from time to time. He's on the new EP. But he would always be like, no, I can't really make practice. No, I can't really make that show. And then every once in a while he'd be like, oh yeah, I'll be there. And we're like, well, we're playing at a coffee shop in Sheboygan. I don't know if there's enough room or if they have like space for electric guitar. He's like, oh, that's fine. I'll just bring my small amp. So, then he would come, and then everything would completely change the mood of the music, which, like when we were on, I feel like it was really, really great. And we did a lot of really cool music, but again, it could be tricky to balance like all the different types of instruments and stuff. So
this question, it's kind of interesting because it kind of includes music and kind of books and stuff. So you're obviously very like embedded with libraries,
true,
reading, you're a writer, all that stuff. So you've got the internet right now, and people are putting stuff online, like stuff like this, CDs, everything, and kind of thinking that it's going to last forever up there. It's on the internet. It's going to be up there forever. But I think you and I are of an age now where we're seeing stuff that was on the internet 20 years ago that's all of a sudden gone.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, well, this platform is gone. This platform, do you think that people are going to eventually kind of go back to like a library, or people are going to end up kind of wanting more of a physical media at some point? Or do you think it's always going to be...
That's a very triggering question. Do you think people are going to go back to a library?
Or do you think it's always going to be disposable, like this, throw it online and then it disappears?
I mean, all it's going to take is one EMP from the sun, and the entire web goes down. And then where's your TikTok, kids? No, I mean, I think each generation is going to do their own thing. Like we were... people who grew up in the era just before the internet, and then like it became big. I mean, like we're like the driving force behind the abomination of like Facebook and social media, and we're like living in those worlds, and that's all very temporary. Like we got excited about all that stuff because it was new. It's new technology. But yeah, I mean, I think eventually people are going to come back around to other things. And I mean, it's already started, there's tape labels and there's vinyl labels, and, records outsold everything, for the past 3 years. Even though, only half of the people who buy records have record players, which I think is interesting. Other people just buy them because they like to have the object, and I think that's a result of the kind of a backlash to like this all digital environment that we're in. And I think as much as people enjoy like having everything on their phone, which I do too. I mean, I've got a Spotify, and it's amazing. Every time a new album comes out, I can listen to it. I can listen to anything I want from anywhere, almost. But yeah, I mean, the downside to that, of course, is that you lose all that early stuff, and especially like the stuff from the early days of the internet. Like when I first started playing out and doing stuff, like nobody had digital cameras, or a few people might have. And I like, here's a picture. Okay, so here's a picture of me and Emily playing at the New Moon in like maybe 2002 or 3, and this was taken on a digital camera that a friend of mine had. So it actually turned out pretty well. But I mean, we weren't playing that fast. It's just really blurry because it's a digital camera from the early era. And here's a picture of me playing with the original like acoustic trio. And this was done on a film camera. So yeah, I mean, I've got all these pictures of like various early bands that I played in, and it's all on like film camera stuff. And, like we never did videos because you had to find somebody that had all this video gear and stuff, and how it's just so easy to do that, which is really cool. I mean, it creates more opportunities for more people. And so it's really awesome. But yeah, unfortunately, a lot of that early stuff, like I'm sort of just getting back into music. Like, I mean, I've put out digital music in the past decade, but this is kind of like my first big like project that is actually put out on CD. And, we kind of struggled like, okay, are we really going to put out a CD? But more people I talk to about music, like people who really love music and really want to support bands, they just want to buy the CD or tape or like whatever it is you put out. They want to buy that. They want to buy the merch because they're supportive, So I think I lost my train of thought.
So it's libraries and
libraries rule.
So that's the new EP right there.
I'm gonna open it up. This is a fresh copy right here. So that plastic ripping off.
I love that smell on a new CD too. Yeah, I always sniff them when I open them.
Open it up here for the ASMR people. Listen to that. Okay, that's you couldn't hear that, but that's all right. Here's the CD. It's a compact disc. You put it in your compact disc player, and or your 1994 Pontiac. There's the CD. Anyway, yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, so you were approached by another Steve McCabe, who saw you somewhere, and I'll kind of let you tell the story, but he invited you up to his big garage studios in Oshkosh.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've known Steve for a really long time. We were English majors together at UW Oshkosh in the late 90s. And, I've been following his different music projects since then. And, like, I guess it was maybe 2019, 2019, we'll say, that he, he's like, hey, I'm putting the studio together. I'm trying to find, bands that might want to have something to record. And, at the time I had moved, fairly recently to the Madison area, and I hadn't been doing music for a while because most of my other collaborators are not, zero of my collaborators are in the Madison area. So I just felt like, well, maybe my time has passed. I'm kind of going to be done, but I'm still writing songs. So when I heard, when Steve approached me about recording something in his new studio, I was like, yeah, I got a song for you. So, I called up a couple friends, Emily, on cello and Derek on drums. And we went up there and Jesse happened to be available as well. So that was awesome. So the four of us met up there at the studio and we recorded the song Irises. So yeah, it was a really great experience. It was a lot of fun. And then, as we, COVID happened after that. I think I'm getting the right order. But then when that was over, then I was like, hey, I've got more songs. Do you ever want to record even more music up there with you? And he's like, yeah, let's do it. So then we started recording the EP in 2022. I want to say I had like five more songs ready. So
it was interesting because your Bandcamp page is really good, by the way. And since you're a writer, you can tell you've got a website which is a wealth of information.
Yeah.
But it's nice because you go into each song, and I thought it was interesting because you were kind of doing a lot of these songs came about from a songwriting group you were in.
True.
I'm going to pronounce it wrong.
Go ahead.
Ortugas. That's
close.
Okay.
So I got a picture here. This is not of the Ortugas, but this is so in like 2010, 2011, I was living in Kewaskum, Wisconsin, which is a very small town. And I started seeing this guy at this coffee shop in town. I would walk to the coffee shop. I was the library director there. And so I worked at the library. At my lunch break, I'd walk to the local coffee shop and have lunch. And I kept seeing this hipster guy there. And I was like, there's another hipster in town? How is that possible? So I at some point we started talking, and now he's one of my best friends, Charles, and he's like, hey, I'm part of this group called Mead Lake's Most Wanted. I'm like, never heard of them. And he's like, that's okay. No one has. We are a writers group. They started meeting in West Bend at a bar. They would bring their typewriters into the bar and like type poems, which is very like annoying probably to most of the people there. But and then they're like, but now we're going to actually be musicians. We've decided to transition from writing poems to writing songs. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'm a retired poet who is currently writing songs. So then, like we just like hit it off. And so he invited me up to their retreat, which is at one of the friends' cabins up north. And so this is a photo. This is a picture of Mead Lake's Most Wanted from a few years back. And so we go up to this cabin a couple times a year and basically just like sit around, chain smoke, talk about life. And most of the time, though, we're doing music. And so these guys are awesome. They had a spreadsheet when I got there, and they were like, here's where we want to be in 3 years. Here's where we want to be in 5 years. And they had like, we're going to record an album. We're going to do this. We're going to play this many shows. We're going to do this and that. And I'm like, okay. Like, I mean, they had never done anything like that before. And so they looked to me as like the experienced person who'd been, like playing in failed bands his whole adult life. And I was like, that's an ambitious, you've got a spreadsheet with all this stuff. And so anyway, so I started playing with them. We put out actually a really cool EP. I should have brought a copy of it with me, but I did not. But we still play music together. But after they hit that, played their 5 shows and put out their EP, they're done with like playing out. So they're just like, now we just record in the garage studio every year. And part of that is a side project of the main group, which is the same people in the main group, but like more drunker in a later night, where we become the Ortugas. So what we do is we just brainstorm a bunch of words and phrases and write it on a pizza box. And then at some point in the night, we're like, okay, it's Ortugas time. We get to the studio. We all go in the garage and everybody chooses 2 song titles at random. And you've got an hour to write the song and come back and play it for the group. And you run through it a couple times and then everybody puts something down on it. And that's like a real rough demo of whatever that song might be. So that was like it was a really strange process for me I'd always just written songs by myself and, never really had anyone else to bounce them off of or, just whatever, just my process is just writing alone. So writing with a bunch of other people and just having to have something immediately, like 45 minutes, everyone's like knocking on doors, be like, come on back out to the garage and play your song. And so that's where like half of the songs on the EP were the result of those sessions. And a lot of my new music too it's the same thing. It's a really cool process because it forces you to like get in this writing space, even if you're, it's like late at night and stuff like that. But, that's a weird thing.
Did they change up like the things? Because I know the Pharmacist, it was, was a title, one of the titles. And then another thing was like almost like the topic of the song was kind of the thing you were working on. I don't remember if it was Bread and Bones or one of those, but.
Yes. I mean, those are all from different sessions and in different years. So, I mean, like, I don't remember what the one was for the Pharmacist, but I mean, I just got the words, the Pharmacist. Now you go write a song. And so, like with that one and, it also like you play the acoustic guitar like I do and, you've got a capo and you've got a bunch of chords and that's about it. You can just move things up and down. And so I tried to experiment a little more with, different chord forms and stuff like that. I don't know if it's like completely successful on that, but I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And so when you brought these songs to Steve McCabe, like when you went back there the second time, I mean, obviously at that point you guys knew that there was enough here for an EP.
Yeah.
And then did the goal also become, we're doing a full EP at that point?
Yeah. And he kept gently prodding me, like, you've got to have more songs, right? There's got to be like some more in there. Let's do a full album. And I'm like, the way my songwriting process has always worked has been like, I'll write, 5 half dozen songs every year. And out of those, I know that that's just the process. And only 1 or 2 of those are going to be actually good songs that I'm ever going to want to revisit again or like record seriously or put in a set list. The other 3 or 4 are just like part of the process of getting to those good songs. So that's kind of like a lot of like, me coming in with saying I have 6 good songs. I don't want to have any filler on the album. I've got like 4 other what I would consider B-sides, but I don't want to record those. So yeah, we got six good songs, and let's do them right.
So all 6 songs are really good. Like the first listen, it was enjoyable. Then I kept every listen that I'd go back to, I enjoyed more. You had Dean and Nate play bass on this, which I think was it kind of cool to hear. Like I don't know if Dean and Nate were people that Steev brought in, but each instrument as it was being added, did it kind of change the dynamic of the song and just kind of totally change it? Because Dean's bass on the Pharmacist, I really enjoyed. In fact, I reached out to him too and said, I'm listening to the All Joy EP, and that bass is really good on that. And then of course you can hear it with Nate's stand-up bass.
Yeah.
It really changes, like, at least in my opinion, must change the dynamic of the song as you wrote it. Yeah, I mean,
it's a little tricky because the way that I envision the songs, I mean, I almost always hear a cello part, just because I'm so used to listening for that, like as I'm writing. And then Derek is sort of an intuitive drummer who just kind of like does his own thing, that, we just like click really well together as far as our personality goes. But the other stuff, I was just like, well, yeah, I don't know, like, Jesse, can you come in and do your thing? And I didn't really have any ideas for the bass parts necessarily. So yeah, I mean, we recorded the 3 of us just recorded everything live. And then I think we just like dropped out my scratch vocals and guitar, and then I recorded another guitar on top of that. And then everyone else would come in later into the studio and just kind of put something new down. And yeah, I mean, it changes it, but yeah, I mean,
were you there when they added the bass?
Yeah, I was there when they did that. And I mean, I love what they do, and I think it was really cool that they were willing to do that. And gosh, I mean, it really makes me think, man, bass players are so underrated. Just because like listening to the songs before the bass was added and then after the bass, and I'm just like, yeah, now they sound like real songs, and it's like, it's weird that you don't, at least I don't, I'm sorry, bass players of the world. Like when I'm writing a song on the acoustic guitar, I'm like, oh, here's the song. You got chords, you got a singer. What more do you need? And, I originally had envisioned this as being a little more minimal. That's a phrase? As being like a minimal project as opposed to like the Inkwell Collective, which is a little more maximal. But of course, as we ended up here, I mean, it's all kind of the same noisy stuff as what I had done in the past. Just, better songs, better production values. But yeah, I mean, the bass totally changed how things felt.
Well, you added also piano, and you're playing banjo on one of the songs.
Yeah. So if I could show one more, actually, I'm going to show two more of my images here. So this album here, albums that changed my life. 16 Horsepower put out this album, Low Estate, in 1996. They were a band from Denver, and the lead singer, David Eugene Edwards, plays banjo on the majority of the songs. And that was the first time that I'd ever heard like alternative country music, or, gothic country, whatever you want to call it. And it, again, mind-blowing album if you listen to that. And then this, Danielson family put out this album in the late 90s, and this is like a freak folk type album with banjo on it. And this is the first thing that I actually heard banjo in like contemporary, alternative music. And it's actually Sufjan Stevens plays banjo on it. And So that was when I went out and bought a banjo after I heard this Danielson Family album. I was like, I'm going to learn how to play banjo because that seems like it would be a cool thing to do. I never really like learned how to play like a banjo style, so I kind of play it like a guitar. But again, it's like a really good as a songwriter, you want to switch up what you're doing, and I mean there's kind of limited with your tools unless you pick up another instrument and try that. So yeah, the song Irises, I wrote on a guitar originally, but then I switched it over to banjo, and it just felt so much better.
But totally, just like with adding bass. I mean, switching to banjo totally changes the mood of the song.
Yeah.
Is that something like if you played this EP out live a lot? I know you've got some shows coming up, and
we've been playing it live a few times, and like that's the only banjo song in our set list right now. But I have a handful of other songs that I've written on banjo.
Working with Steve McCabe, what did Steve bring to this EP?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like honestly, the big thing was having someone that I really trusted, because I mean, I'm such a fan of his music, especially the first Redshift Headlights album. Like I listened to that constantly when I was hashtag blessed enough to go see like the big album release show that they did at their studio, with like his full, like everybody doing everything. And it was just so cool. Was that you
sitting on the floor in the front?
That was me sitting on the floor in the front. Yeah. And, like I said, I've been a big fan of his music for a long time, and just having someone that I knew and trusted as a writer and as a musician. And like at first I thought, well, it would be cool if maybe he could add like a bunch of weird stuff, like the stuff that he does, he could add it to it. But then like as we were in the studio, that really wasn't his vibe. He was just like, he's really into the gear. He's really into the boards and the switches and the wheels and knobs. And so that was more like his thing. Like, okay, how can we let's use a different mic on this. Let's use a different amp here. Try to make this sound better. How much reverb do you want in this? Like that kind of thing. So it was more hands off as far as like production go. I mean, it depends on how you define that, but it was more like engineering, mixing. And then when we got into like mixing the songs, like the song Bread and Bones was like, I had always pictured it a certain way in my head, which was, I mean, it's probably probably the quietest song on the album. And I wanted to really bring like the upright bass forward on that. I just love the sound of the upright bass. I really wish that I had like a full-time upright bass player in my band, because it's just such a cool, versatile instrument. So I really wanted to bring that forward, and I wanted it to feel like really acoustic. So like that song, when we were working on it in the studio, it went through some iterations where it was less that, and it was a little more like, well, maybe leave the electric guitar scratch track in, and it's like more stuff going on. But then as we started pulling things back, Steve would send me new mixes, and got it to where it sounds really awesome.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite track out of all these?
Oh, okay.
I know that.
Look at them here.
Get Clean is, that sounds like there's a lot in that song.
Oh,
a lot of words.
How much time do we have?
Sounds like the story.
Oh, we only have 3 minutes.
Yeah, we go a little over. So the stories in Get Clean, it sounds like, that must be a song that you wanted to get lyrically kind of right, because you're almost like writing, you're sort of writing history.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Right. Like, yeah, I guess probably like sonically, No Sin is probably my favorite song on the album, because it's got a lot of the like dynamics and stuff that I really enjoy listening to, and it's got a really good violin solo from my friend Rachel, who's a retired violinist. Get Clean was one of those songs that I was like, I knew I wanted to write a song. It's kind of about the life of my great grandfather. And there's a lot too. There's a long backstory that we don't have time for now. But yeah, I really wanted to get that one right.
Let's make time. Let's make some time.
This is like MCU stuff here. because they're like making time, like a different timeline. I don't know. It was a pop culture joke. Yeah. So my great grandfather was a young man during the end of the Great Depression, the beginning of like Prohibition era, and his mom had just died. He and his younger brother and his dad moved to Cicero, Illinois, and he, from all accounts, hated his stepmother, didn't enjoy living there. So as soon as he turned 18, he left home and he went and joined Carson and Barnes Circus, where he worked as a roustabout. And he got on the train in Chicago or in that area somewhere, and traveled up and down the U.S. This is, again, during Prohibition, where it turns out there was a lot of smuggling going on of illicit liquor on circus trains, because they could cross over into Canada and do these shows, and then they could come back and they wouldn't always get found out. And nobody knows, because the family history is murky. Nobody knows what happened exactly. But when he came back to Cicero later that year, he ended up working with Al Capone's gang as like an enforcer or something like that. It's a tricky thing, because what happens next in his story is that a street preacher who, I guess he had it was like his goal to like save young men who were like caught up in all this crime because of Prohibition. So he would just like hang out outside of like pool halls and stuff, and he would like pull young men over and be like, Jesus loves you, don't whatever. And so he got my great grandpa, and I don't know what was said, I don't know what happened, but he talked to him, and the story goes that my great grandpa went to church and he put his gun and a bottle of liquor and his deck of cards up on the altar, gave his life to Jesus, and it sort of like changed the trajectory of like my entire family and my life and my parents and everyone in my family. Just because that became then like our lives, and our like legacy to bear that like come to Jesus moment in perpetuity. But the song Get Clean. So later in his life, he spends then the rest of his life as a preacher in like small churches in Michigan and in Illinois. And as he gets older, he comes to believe that there's no hell, like the punishments of hell is more of a figure of speech or something. And again, this is all stuff that it's like a shame. It's like shame in the family, because then his son, my grandpa, who was a pastor in Madison, he was just like my dad, fell into apostasy because he believed that, God loved everyone and that everyone would get saved eventually and go to heaven, or, whatever it was. And so that's what the song Get Clean is sort of about, those ideas, and I mean, obviously, maybe it's like hitting you over the head with an idea. I don't know. But, the idea is, having this epiphany that everyone, we have this moment where you realize that, oh gosh, I don't want to say like too much about it, because it's I feel like I want everyone to have their own ideas about it, but it's a positive sentiment about, believing that doing things in your life now are what's important. And I mean, same with the song No Sin. It's not, I'm not like saying that I reject all religion and it's all wrong and bad. But just that there's like other choices than just like, telling your 5-year-old that they're going to die and burn in hell, which is kind of a traumatic thing to say to a little kid. And there's other options out there. So anyway, that's what that song is sort of about emotionally.
What made you decide to end the EP with that song?
I wanted to have like sort of an arc, like musically. And that one is like I mean, I tend to write like, these like mid-tempo mopey rocker songs, and then these like, 6/8, folk punk songs. And so I was like, well, let's end it on a high point. And originally I wanted to have like trumpets and stuff in the ending. But didn't quite get trumpets in there. But yeah, I just thought it'd be a good ending to the thing.
And you played Mile of Music. Were you there this year or the previous Miles?
It was either 8 or 9. I don't remember. It was the one that was right after COVID, so it was in 2021 that we played there.
And if you were playing, let's say Mile of Music was right now, and you were hitting the stage or you were seeing somebody out on the sidewalk, how would you sell the CD?
Oh gosh.
How would you explain yourself and the music on the CD? It's like a dreaded elevator pitch.
Yeah, no, it's hard because I don't know what my music sounds like. I mean, it's like, like I vacillate between saying like folk punk, which it's not really, but I feel like that's kind of like my mindset, like play the acoustic guitar loud and yell, be emotional. But then also like it definitely has like kind of like this Midwest indie rock vibe to it that I know a lot of stuff from this area does. I mean, we were talking earlier off mic and you were like, oh, this sounds kind of like stuff that Steev does. And I was saying that, we had a bunch of like ex-Oshkosh people had met up for a show in Madison, and we were talking about that, and we're like, oh yeah, you can definitely hear like the Oshkosh sound in some of this music. And I was like, is there an Oshkosh sound? I don't know, maybe there is. So that's what I would be like, hey, you like the Oshkosh sound? This CD is rife with it. Well, it's bad pitch.
How's the music scene different in Madison compared to Oshkosh, Appleton, Fond du Lac?
Yeah, I mean, Madison's tricky because,
Is it hard to break into the scene down there? Is it pretty cliquey?
Well, so it is and it isn't. I have a take, which is that, Madison is like a much more like transient-y, like there's a lot like student bands and student music, and it's like a lot more like youth oriented. So there's like a ton of new bands, and they'll come out with stuff and they'll play for a while and then they'll move on, whereas like the Fox Valley scene is not really like that. I mean, it's like bands tend to stay here and they form their close friendships and their groups, and people come in and out, but they're like, like what Dusk is doing. Like they have like a whole world of music, and their own label and all this stuff that they're doing. Madison, I don't think really has that. But it's pretty vibrant. I mean, unfortunately, there's not a lot of like really great venues there. I mean, there's the big venues that are hard to get into. And then there's like places like the Rigby, which like literally anybody could play at the Rigby, but you've got to do everything then. You've got to provide your own sound. You've got to provide your door person. You got to do all your own marketing. So, I mean, it's cool that they offer a space for bands, but there's there was a place that just closed, unfortunately, called Dark Star Art Bar. And they had like a dedicated stage. They had a sound guy, but it was like a small venue. So it was absolutely perfect for bands that, they can draw 30 to 50 people, and that's probably tops. And like most of those venues are gone, like the Frequency, which is really good for that. And then it got closed down, and then this other space, Barley Pop Live, opened, and that closed down because it, I think that was mainly a COVID thing. But so there's not a lot of like great official spaces, but there are a lot of DIY spaces in Madison, and those cater to like younger bands. So like my son is in a band called the Nile Club. They're out of Milwaukee. And like they do a lot of shows with like Shuby and Lunar Moth and a lot of these like younger bands, which is really cool to see all these young musicians playing cool music, but they're all like my kids' age, So it's weird for me to be like, hey, I got this new EP that I'm working on or that I want to put out, and like I look around for musicians that are my age, and there's just not a lot in the area, that everyone has kind of moved on, or they're playing, like very sporadically or whatever. So it's hard to set up shows. And then I'm like, okay, I guess I gotta do shows with people in their 20s. So that's a whole other dynamic of it that's been interesting, like coming back into trying to support this album and, trying to just keep playing music live, as often as I can.
Well, we're getting near the end of the show, but I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about Justin Perkins and the mastering of this album. So yeah. Justin Perkins did it at the Mystery Room down in Madison.
Yeah.
You said you've never met Justin before.
I don't think so, no.
How do you feel the mastering was on this album?
Oh my gosh, this is because he's going to be here next week, and you're going to play this back, and he's going to be like, how do you feel about Steve Baker? The mastering is just impeccable.
Yeah, what else could you say?
That's great. I mean, like I've been listening to like bands that he masters, and I see his name all the time on records that I love.
It's the stuff like he does everything. It's like he just did a New Kids on the Block album, and it's like, what?
Yeah. Well, I think he did Buffalo Nickel's new album, which is like one of my top 5 of the year. And it's just a really cool like range of pop and indie and like self-produced stuff, and it was really cool. And Steve knows him really well, so it was like kind of back and forth between those two guys. And Steve was also like as he was mixing this, he was like, I think I'm gonna leave some of that in for Justin to do this or that on. So he was like mixing it specifically for Justin's ears, which I thought was kind of a cool thing that maybe not everyone gets to have that.
Where can people find this EP? Where can people see you perform?
Yeah. So this EP is available at any of our live performances. You can also download it on Bandcamp. It's not this form. It's the digital form. So support Bandcamp as long as you can. Hopefully it'll still be around the next couple of years. But you can stream it on any of the streaming services, which obviously we all do. I have Spotify. But obviously I don't get any money from that. It'd be great to like break even on this project, which is to say, our next show coming up is December 1st. We're playing at Mickey's in Madison, kind of like a time-honored music bar down on Willie Street in Madison. And we're playing with 2 bands. One band, Fangerless. They're Madison, like, I think they call themselves a cowboy punk band. It's like banjo, electric guitar, and fiddle. And then a singer-songwriter from Milwaukee named Dead Swans. It's just one person, but he's got a long band name. So that's going to be a really cool show, and that's going to be a full band show with myself and Emily and Derek. And when we do live shows like that, where all 3 of us, we go by Steve Baker and Dirt Sermons. And
I like it.
Thank you. So yeah, I mean it's gonna be cool. We're gonna stay up really late and play loud folk music. And otherwise, yeah, I mean we're trying to set up shows here in the Fox Valley area, and hopefully we will be around here a bit, and hopefully do Mile next year and some other things. But yeah, that's where you can get the CD.